Great to have you all here. I think it's cruel and unusual punishment for me to speak at half an hour after lunch because that's when your digestive system is really moving, getting to gear, and you're probably just really tired and just want to put your head down on your desk. So could you all just stand up for me, please? Come on, you can all do it. All right. It's not too hard. Actually, so this is actually a question I'd like to ask. If you are a data scientist, please sit down. Oh, okay. I thought this was a data science audience. Actually, it's great. Okay, we're going to try something different now. Now, stay very still. If you can feel your heartbeat, please sit down. Pretty interesting result. Huh? So those of you who are standing don't have a heartbeat and you're zombies. Okay, you can sit down. I was completely fascinated by Neelan's talk because I too am very interested in psychology and really how the brain works. So my talk is really twofold. First is there's all this thing about big data that I have to address. But the other big part of it is really understanding from the perspective, in order to understand big data, is to understand how do we as people think? How do we make decisions? How does our mind work? And a lot of times we don't really think deeply enough about how we think, and therefore we start buying tools like technologies that don't reflect the way we think. So it's really important for us to dive into that. So that's what I'm going to give you today. And if you're the type of person who take notes, I'll give you 5 keys to do something useful. And each of these keys might seem, I'd say, a little bit obvious at first, but it's when you really think about what each of these keys mean that you'll start to understand how this relates to your choice of how you might leverage big data for your business. So let's pray the buttons work. All right, so it wouldn't be a big data talk if I didn't have big numbers on here. I know every speaker had huge numbers, and I'll be embarrassed if I didn't have numbers. So here's some big numbers for you. 1.2 million, 12 million, et cetera, up to a quadrillion. What do you suppose these mean? Well, in a human context, let's just think about yourself. There are 1.2 million fibers in your optic nerve. That's pretty impressive. There are 12 million receptor cells in your nose. Now, I never knew that my nose is more sensitive than my eyes because most of us are very visual people. I don't really think about smelling things. It takes 12 million receptor cells to smell something. It's really amazing when you think about the chemistry that's going on, how your nose can distinguish one odor from another at such precision. It's remarkable. Don't ask me how many receptor cells a dog has. It's probably in the hundreds of millions. But then, think about all this data, right? There are 86 billion neurons in your brain processing senses coming from your different senses. And then out of that, there are 1 quadrillion, 10 to the 15 connections in your brain between all these neurons processing them together. So what's really going on here? What is the story I'm trying to say? The point is that you are big data. If you're challenged to think about what is big data, really think about yourself. That's where I would start. Okay, so really the question is not just, okay, you're big data, that's great, but how does your mind actually accept the input from all your sensory cells and make decisions out of it? Everyone knows about the central nervous system. Here's your brain, your spinal cord, that's where your thought works. But if you weren't paying attention in biology class, you probably didn't know about the next 2 things. The first is there is something called the autonomic nervous system. This is your heart, your iris, your stomach. That's why I asked you if you could feel your heartbeat. Because most of the time we go through a day, you don't really think about your heart beating, do you? I mean, unless you saw someone that you just kind of have feelings for. Your heart might beat a little faster, you might notice it. But most of the time you don't really think about it. However, if your heart stops beating, you'd be dead. So there's something about your heart beating that is automatic, and yet it relies on the inputs that are coming from all over your body. For example, the oxygen level in your blood, how much exertion you're doing. I went up to the top of St. Paul's Cathedral, and I could feel my heartbeat. Yeah. When I was just walking around the streets of London, I didn't really think about my heart beating. So it's really a system that is automatic, and it's making billions of decisions all the time about how to adjust different parts of your body. And that is pretty amazing. The part that we usually think about when we think about thought is the sensory somatic nervous system. This is your vision, your hearing. How do you turn all that, your muscular motion, how do you turn that into a decision? So I think a lot of times when we think about big data, at least in the context of this particular conference, where we've been focused a lot on the stuff that data scientists do on the left, and haven't really thought enough about, well, what does it take for us to make business decisions at the more macro level, such as me deciding to, let's say, bring an umbrella when I go outside versus wear a light sweater. So if you think about the two sides of this, right? On the left-hand side here, autonomic side, we talk about, this is really where the data scientists reside. They look at targeted advertising, look at recommendation engines that Neelan mentioned from Amazon, automated stock trading, supply chain optimization. These are all this cool stuff that data scientists really love because that's what they live and breathe. Really, it takes amazing algorithms to do these stuff on the left. However, I would say most of us, if we're executives, managers, et cetera, who are not data scientists, really struggle with that sort of data processing because we just sort of expect it to happen. For example, if I were the owner of Amazon, I would just expect that our website would work, the recommendation engine would work. I wouldn't want to think about, oh, geez, did my data scientist tweak the right algorithm? I just want that to be taken care of. And that's how we treat our bodies, right? We want our bodies to just work the way they do. We don't want to think about how do we take care of, there's this itch on my foot. There's all these different things that your body should just handle on its own. So what we really want to do is think about how do we address this right-hand side, the sensory somatic part, where you can analyze ROIs on marketing campaigns, for example, or determine why a campaign was successful for a particular region. And using big data for these more macro strategic issues is something that people haven't really thought a lot about, and that's what I want to address today. So just as I think I talked enough about data scientists, I love them, I'm not bashing them. I just think we need to focus more on the people on the right-hand side, which I think that's why I call it the rest of us, because I think a lot of us are sitting on the right-hand side. So the way we understand data is it has to be simple enough for the rest of us. Like, I used to be a software engineer and a PhD scientist, but I don't really want to do that anymore. I don't want to deal with algorithms. Just show me the graphs and give me the data that I need to make business decisions in my role in marketing. But it has to be flexible enough to answer the unanticipated questions. A lot of times when someone you go to a presentation and there is a graph up there, and you ever been in that situation, and someone else raises their hand and says, excuse me, how did you get that result? And the speaker will say, well, I did it by doing X, Y, Z, and this is the result. And then someone else will raise their hand and say, well, did you take into account the fact that the sales you talked about last quarter was over the holidays, and therefore people were traveling, they were on vacation, they weren't spending at home. So it's like, well, no, I didn't think about that. So a lot of times, right, when we look at data, we have canned answers for canned questions, and we don't have the ability to answer unanticipated questions. And that's what you really need to think about. Does your data or does your business intelligence software allow you to do that? Another part is if you think about our senses, right? Even as I wave my arms, as I talk to you, I'm using a small subset of the data that I'm collecting. I'm not thinking about every single part of my body as I interact with you. And that's the same way we look at data at the macro business level. So a takeaway from there is you don't need all the data all the time. And so just to summarize, the gap here is we spent a lot of big data solutions, processing massive volumes of data. And what we need really is some business user access to big data for meaningful analysis and discovery. And how do you get to that? So we got that. First, if you're taking notes and expanding on them, the first point is that big data has two fundamentally different use cases. And if you don't make sure you have the right tools for the right type of use cases, you would miss out. You'll get very frustrated trying to do things. Try to use a sledgehammer for something that you need a very fine tool for. So here's something for you to try. Like, keep this interactive. If you have something to pick up, whether it's a notepad or your phone or something, you just try picking it up. I just want you to get that experience. A glass of water, anything like that. Okay. What did you notice about it? Did you use every single sense in your arm or in your hand? If you're like me, right, you probably think about a sequence. First you grab it, your fingertip senses the pressure, then your fingers wrap around the object, then your hand might get your glass or your notepad at the right angle, and then your arm lifts it up. So how much detail did you really need to do that? And if you're watching TV at all, if you're alive, if you weren't a zombie for the last 2 months, you've been watching the Olympics and the Paralympics. What's so amazing is that the Paralympics, these people with the prosthetic arms, prosthetic legs, etc., were doing the same sports that completely whole humans were doing. And it's amazing. It really shows that you don't have to have everything in order to do get the same type of result. And so I would argue that before you make it a requirement for big data to say, number one, I need to have access to all the data all the time. You need to ask yourself, do I really need all the data? And then do I need it all the time? Or is there some way I can reduce the scope of big data in order to make it more accessible to the average user? So really what that means in sort of common language is relevance. For example, a marketing campaign manager, you need a statistically relevant sample of daily generated data. I don't need the data from every single second of every single day. That is probably meaningless for a marketing campaign manager. For a product manager, right? I care about data from product X. I don't care about data from my entire company. So it might make sense if let's say I have a 10 petabyte Hadoop data source for all the company's data. Well, I only care about maybe a tiny slice of it because I'm the product manager for that little bit of data. So could I actually get better and faster insights if I could just scope it down? That's a question to ask. So the second point is really about relevance. How do you choose the data that is relevant to the problem you're trying to solve, not just take data that, because someone told you we have all this data, that you have to use all the data. So the third thing is also related to this. How do you make decisions? You guys like shopping? Probably do. So here's a woman shopping for, looks like salad, I think. We have bagged salads in the States. I don't know if you guys have bagged salads. I prefer to get fresh salad, not in the bag. But anyways, this is the best picture I could find on Google Images. So consciously, she is thinking about a shopping list. Right? She's got a shopping list. I got to buy salad. All right, she's thinking about flavor. Do I want romaine lettuce, iceberg lettuce? I don't know what lettuce you have here. Think about the price. Do I want the expensive one, cheap one? The brand is important to her. So you think that this is how most decisions are made, right? You have some simple list of criteria, and here is your business decision. Let's bring it to a business context. Just give me sales by region, by product, by this, by that, and boom, got my answer. But what you don't realize is that your decisions are influenced by the subconscious. For her, it could be the packaging. Attractive packaging sells better than that unattractive packaging. The smells, the odors around her in the salad section, how hungry she is. She might want the extra large bag if she's really hungry. The background music might affect really which one she chooses. Those are, if you think about data, right, those are additional dimensions that affect your decisions that you're not aware of, but they are still there. And the third part gets back to what I introduced earlier, the whole concept of the autonomic part of our system. Her heart rate might affect which salad she decides to get, or stomach acid, saliva production. You can't control those things, they just happen. And when you make a decision and you don't understand what factors are actually affecting your decision, you're more likely to make one that is prejudiced by some other reason or just out of sheer ignorance. So we talked about relevance, and now we need to talk a little bit about context. What do you notice about this airplane cockpit? How does it present information? And I think this is a fantastic example of really a decision-making dashboard. Because you think about an airplane, the pilot cannot make a single mistake. I mean, the plane crashes, everyone's dead, right? This is life and death. So you can be sure that the designers of airplane cockpits have really thought about the whole problem of how do you present data to a pilot in a way that maximizes the safety of this airplane. So if you really take some time to look at the picture there, you see that the most important data, perhaps altitude, pitch, location, are presented front and center in these little screens that you see there. But he is surrounded by hundreds of little buttons and different readouts and other things that give him more context about what is the current situation. So you heard about airline accidents where the pilot didn't take into account that they're going to land into a mountainous area, so therefore they need to maybe add a little more room for error if you're going to go in for a landing. Or they weren't aware of certain thunderstorms or other things nearby. So the ability to have contextual information around what you see is actually critical to the way you look at data. So the trouble for big data is that a lot of times, right, we're so focused on jamming everything into here that we don't realize what we're missing. And what I mean is, for most companies, and I've listened to a lot of presentations the last few days, you get web traffic logs, transaction data, social network data, wonderful stuff. Let's stick it in a Hadoop cluster or whatever it is, and let's get some MapReduce algorithms and run all these get these great results. However, what you don't have is, well, what if there was like a customer survey we did, and this survey could affect the decision that we're going to make. I want to understand how did the customers that we survey correlate to something else from their behavior, whether it's on web traffic or from something that they bought with the transaction data. Or maybe I'm in marketing and I'm thinking about, what if I had a new segmentation model? I want to change it from what I had, based that these original assumptions went into. So what you really need is not something that is going to run just in your big data repository and give you the answers. You really need something that is external to your big data repository, allows you to build data models on the fly that can incorporate new ideas and new sources into it and blend it seamlessly. So the real challenge is that traditional BI, you spend months and years creating a beautiful data model, and then if you want to change something, it takes months or weeks to change, and then you have to do this massive reloading of everything. What you really need is something that can be flexible enough to adapt to a new idea, someone who comes to you and say, hey, I got new data for you, could you please put that in? And you say, oh yeah, I can do that in a day or less. And that is really critical in how you decide what to, which BI tools to invest in. So two big things in points 2 and 3 are relevance and context. Those are really critical. If you don't have that, you're really making decisions in a blind way. Now, this is kind of very, very interesting that Neelan referenced the Amazon study about 100 milliseconds equals 1% decrease in the revenue. This is another study that showed, well, what's the consequence of longer site load times, not in milliseconds, but in seconds. Going from 3 seconds to 5 seconds to 10 seconds, you really had a huge change in number of lost page views, conversions, bounce rates. So if that is true, right, I think we understand that that is true, then how does that reflect on our experience with the business intelligence platforms that we deal with and with big data in general? Here's two company names and that been turned into verbs. I Googled it, tweeted it. We're all tweeting this week. Why do you suppose that these are so popular words? How do you think they made into almost into a dictionary? Think about Google, right? I searched for Google latency. It returned my result in 0.3 seconds. I mean, that is just unbelievable. 0.3 seconds. How did it do that? Well, the reason these companies are made into our common vocabulary is that they're easy to use. They're used frequently. I do many searches all day long. Or if you're a Twitter user, you probably use it many times a day. It gives you instant feedback, right? You ask a question, you get an answer. You ask a question, you get another answer. I mean, that's, I think, one of the main reasons why Google is so popular. It's not only is it fast, and it's accurate. So that becomes a key requirement in the way that we look at data. You have to demand instant gratification. So a lot of times, right, I've listened to some of the other talks this week, is that when you look at big data, you're saying that, well, if I run this algorithm and it takes me 5 minutes, 2 hours, 2 days, that's all right because it's big data, right? I just expect slowness. But think about the impact on someone like you. If you're an executive or manager, you ask a question, do you really want to wait even 2 minutes or even 10 seconds? Because we looked at what happened with the attention span of people who use websites nowadays. So it's really, really critical that when you ask a question, you have to get an answer back within a second, probably no more than 2 seconds. And I believe that people are too willing to make compromises just because the label big data is on whatever you're looking at. And that is a serious problem because now that means that you're not going to get the value out of big data that you hoped you would because you just get frustrated and not ask the questions. So before I get to the fifth point, I just want to cite a particular use case from one of our customers because I think trying to make this more tangible is really going to help you. So we have a customer that's is an online casual social gaming company. Just like how you can play Scrabble online with your friends and on Facebook, things like that. So this company, it's a large company. They have hundreds of online games. And they actually log, I believe they have, how many now? Number keeps changing. They have 3 billion games, or 3 billion games that are played 3 billion times every month. It's pretty staggering. And about 40 million users. So with all these users playing all these games, right? And naturally, it's a big amount of data. Naturally, they have a Hadoop cluster. They dump all the data from the game servers into a log server, into the Hadoop cluster. And there, do they just run analysis on that? No, they don't. They actually have Hive on top of Hadoop, and then they use Hive to extract on a daily basis KPIs that are relevant to the business in order for the product managers to make business decisions. And what they do is, after they, every day, Hive is going to aggregate the data for them down to a smaller, manageable amount. They bring that in memory into ClickView, and now they can really look at, using ClickView, fulfill the requirements that we talked about, right? Because ClickView is looking at the use case for the rest of us, not for a data scientist. ClickView is not a data scientist tool. ClickView is something that managers, executives use to understand, what is the, how do you make a business decision? Data is relevant to the current problem. You're looking at, they collect data. They import data into ClickView that's relevant to whatever data decisions they're trying to make, database decisions. They don't just say, we want the entire 10 petabytes or whatever it is to be accessible all at once. They use data in context with other data. They definitely don't just look at the Hadoop data. They are looking at, like what I explained earlier, in new market segmentations, customer survey results, other things to bring it in and make that insight far more richer than what you could get just from a set of web logs. And they absolutely do this. Number 4, demand instant gratification. The reason why ClickView has taken off at this company like wildfire is because each manager sees the data that's relevant to the product that they manage, and then they're asking questions really in rapid fire format. And really what's striking about the way they use it is they don't just get a static dashboard. They are able to ask, click on another dimension, ask another question, click on another dimension, ask another question. And that process keeps going until they arrive at whatever the insight they're looking for. And so most of the time, when you think about a static graph on a PowerPoint, as I mentioned earlier, you can't choose, you can't add more dimensions to it very easily, whether you're using Excel or something else. But when you're using something such as ClickView, you're able to look at just about any dimension in your entire data set extremely fast. And that makes a huge difference in your ability to get insight from data. So to wrap it up, I like to add one more point that is kind of fun. And even if you don't care about data, I think this is still relevant to you. So you're aware of the 5 main senses, and I don't need to tell you what they are. I mentioned the autonomic system, body temperature, CO2 level, your hormone level. We'll mention that. And a lot of things that affect how you make decisions, right? Instinct memory, prejudices, emotions, things like that in context. So what appears to be a very methodical process of decision making is actually clouded by a lot of other things that really ensures that we don't always make the optimal decision, whether in life or in business. I did a survey on a little search on Wikipedia, and this is just 1/3 of the list of about over 100, 150 different cognitive biases that we are susceptible to. Ambiguity effect, anchoring effect, attentional. It goes on and on. It just shows that we as humans are so flawed in our ability to make decisions. It's mind-boggling that we still exist as a race. We haven't just killed each other. and one example is confirmation bias. Tendency to search for and interpret information that confirms one's perceptions. I don't know, in the UK, maybe some of you are liberal, some of you are conservative, and if you watch advertising that is related, or you listen to a speech that is relevant to your point of view, you tend to like it more, right? And then you consume more of it, and pretty soon you get a very polarized society, and that's kind of what's happening in the US as well. But so all these biases are affecting your ability to make a logical decision, because now it becomes a very emotional thing based on all these biases. So the question we have is, how do you fight these biases? Do you just ignore the fact that you have them, or do you do something about them? I would suggest to you that there are 2 ways to do something about them. First way is to go back to key number 3. View data in context with other data. If you don't have that context, you're really just having this tunnel vision and say, okay, my decision is based on this set of data. The second point is to turn the discovery of insights into a social process. So for example, if I am conservative, maybe it's good for me to talk to someone who is liberal and understand their point of view and do that. Well, in your business, right, granted, if you're a megalomaniac, tyrannical boss, you might just say, well, my decision is my decision, and we were done. But in most companies, we try to be collaborative. People want to share information. People want to share insights. If you don't have that ability to be collaborative, then you risk the failure to offset your own biases with someone else's biases. Now, what do we mean by turning it into a social process still? Because everyone loves the word social. It's sort of in our DNA now to put social in every marketing presentation. It's really about the ability to, you and a colleague or you and someone across the world, the other side of the world, being able to sit down and say, what is the difference between your perception of the data and my perception of the data? And are there other dimensions we have not considered? Could you possibly look at a data and slice it in a different way, perhaps by something that's going to reveal a trend that you didn't know about before? So what we mean by social then is not just everyone sitting around a PowerPoint presentation and going, yeah, that's good, we all agree, right? Teamwork is our company value, so everyone's just going to nod their head and agree. Social is really about being able to challenge each other using data to arrive at better decisions. And if you are unable to do that in your BI tool, I would suggest that is a big shortcoming, and you probably have built-in biases into the way your dashboards are created, in the way that templates are made for you, and that's really a big risk that we all face. Traditionally, BI is built by IT. They create dashboards for executives to consume, and the executives just go, their perception is clouded by the way IT created it. And I'm not going to blame IT, I'll just say that's just the way people work. You're spoon-fed something, and you just sort of consume it that way. So fifth point, and I can wrap with this, is to combat cognitive biases via collaboration and insights and decisions. First, you have to understand together what is, agree on what you understand, and then you got to agree on the decisions you make. And that's really how you turn big data from something that is just this, big melting pot of information overload into something that's actually useful for each one of us. And that is my message today. Think about big data not just for the data scientists, but think about it, what does it mean for the rest of us to make use of it? So just put up my information up here. For ClickView, we have coming up in just a month, in London, the Business Discovery World Tour. That's where we have a big conference here in London and talk about, help explain what ClickView is, and we have customers and other people come and talk about what we can do, how ClickView helps you make better business decisions. And you can always go to our website. There are live demos you can play with to try to understand the things that I've been talking about today. And you'll see how that the 5 keys really play out in a very tangible way. Doesn't matter what your industry is, doesn't matter what your role is. We can help you make better business decisions. So thank you.